The sun bled red across the plains, a molten smear across the western horizon, as if the sky itself bore a wound. Dust curled in serpentine wisps around the hooves of a tired horse, making its slow, deliberate way into Widow's Peak, a forgotten patch of land where hope rarely bothered to linger. The town lay still, its buildings slumped like drunks in a pew, shadows long and yawning across the cracked earth. No one looked up as the stranger rode in, though eyes watched from behind curtains, through slits in barn walls, from the backs of dim saloons where the whiskey was older than most of its drinkers. Colt McAllister dismounted with a grunt, his left leg dragging slightly, the limp subtle but permanent. His coat bore the stains of road and regret. The dust clung to him like memory. He tied his horse outside the saloon without ceremony and stepped through the swinging doors, boots thudding against worn floorboards, spurs whispering of violence past. Inside, the air was stale with smoke and sweat. A piano player tinkled out a tune that didn't match the mood. At the bar stood a woman with wild red hair pinned back, like a storm pretending to be civilized. She nursed a glass of rye like it owed her money. Her eyes flicked to Colt the moment he entered, not because he was a stranger, but because he didn't bother to hide it. She raised her glass in mock salute. Ain't every day the Grim Reaper rides into town wearing a duster. Colt didn't blink. I heard the whiskey here was decent. She chuckled, dry as dust. Then you heard wrong. He took the stool beside her. The bartender, a skeletal man with a permanent wince, poured without asking. Colt downed the drink in one motion, as if trying to cauterize something inside. You got a name? The woman asked, watching him from the corner of her eye. Colt. Fitting. And you? Etta Monroe. She sipped again, her tone still casual, but her spine had straightened ever so slightly. Colt studied her with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent a lifetime knowing when to draw. She wore worn riding leathers, boots scuffed from work, not fashion. Her hands were calloused, not delicate. There was strength in her posture, but also something coiled beneath it, something waiting. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said. That what you tell all the towns you limp into? He allowed a small smirk. Only the ones with bad whiskey. Behind the bar, glasses clinked nervously. The room had grown quieter. Men drank faster. Someone got up and left. Colt knew the signs. Trouble was coming. The kind that smelled like sweat and cheap tobacco, and always arrived in groups of 3 or more. Etta finished her drink. You got the look of someone who's running from something. Everyone's running from something, he said. She tilted her head, amused. So what is it for you? Colt didn't answer. He tapped the rim of his glass for another round, but the bartender shook his head and jerked his thumb toward the door. Time to leave. Colt stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then he turned to Etta. Nice meeting you. She nodded once. Likewise. Outside, the air had cooled, but the dust still hovered, restless. Colt walked toward his horse when a voice stopped him. Don't usually see drifters offer up their name without being asked twice. Etta had followed him out, leaning against the porch beam with her arms crossed, moonlight silvering the ends of her hair. He didn't look at her. Didn't seem like you were asking just to be polite. She stepped down, boots crunching against gravel. You looking for work? No. You hiding from something? Not exactly. You kill someone who didn't deserve it. Colt's eyes finally met hers, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then he said, no. But that doesn't mean they deserved what came. Etta looked away, toward the open land beyond the town. I've got a problem. A big one. And not enough time or men to fix it. I'm not a hired gun anymore, Colt replied. I'm just passing through. You don't look like someone who's good at passing through. He opened his mouth, then stopped. From the hills to the north, the wind shifted, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of smoke. Etta stiffened. That's coming from your land, Colt said. They rode hard, her chestnut mare and his black gelding tearing across the dirt road toward the Monroe Ranch. When they crested the ridge, Etta let out a strangled cry. One of her barns was ablaze, flames clawing high into the night sky, casting long shadows over the fence posts like gallows reaching out of the ground. A lone figure on horseback vanished into the trees as they approached, too far to catch. They dismounted near the corral. Etta ran for a water pump, shouting to her ranch hands. Only 2 were on site, both too young and too terrified to do much but throw useless buckets at the inferno. Colt grabbed a tarp and smothered the fire, crawling toward the dry feed pile. Embers sparked against his arms, singeing the leather. He didn't flinch. An hour later, the barn was gone. Only blackened beams and smoke remained. The horses had been saved, but barely. Etta stood in the glow of dying embers, face streaked with soot and fury. "This wasn't random," she said. "No, it wasn't." She turned to him. "This is the second fire in 3 weeks. Next time, it'll be the house. Someone wants your land." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, and they've made it real clear they don't care who they hurt to get it. Sheriff won't help. He's busy playing cards and turning blind eyes." Colt looked over the damage. "You got a plan?" "I did. But it involved a man who promised to marry me last spring, then skipped town with half the bank's cash." Colt looked at her, confused. She gave a short laugh. "Some outdated land law says my father's property can only transfer through blood or legal union. If I don't marry by the next quarter, the bank seizes it on behalf of a new buyer. Guess who that is?" "Who?" "Judd Carmichael. Owns half the valley now. Wants the rest." The name hit Colt like a bullet to the ribs. He said nothing, but his jaw tensed. Etta caught it. "You know him?" "I've met him." She stepped closer. "Then you know what kind of man he is." Colt stared into the smoke. "Yeah, I do." Silence fell again, thicker this time. The wind had died. Only the crackle of dying fire remained. Then Etta said, "You said you weren't looking for work. What about a deal?" "What kind of deal?" "You marry me. Just on paper. I keep the ranch. You get a place to hide out. No feelings. No strings." Colt looked at her, seeing not just the desperation, but the pride behind it. She wasn't begging. She was offering him something, even now. Her land. Her protection. Her name. He swallowed hard. Marriage of convenience. Nothing more. "And when the danger passes, we ride separate ways. No questions asked." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They stood in the smoke, 2 strangers bound by survival, watched by stars and ashes. And far beyond, in the hills, someone lit another match. The morning after the fire smelled like scorched earth and silent resolve. The smoke still lingered, thin and ghost-like, curling through the broken beams of what had once been Etta's barn. Her hands moved quickly as she shoveled charred debris into a wheelbarrow, sleeves rolled past her elbows, jaw set tight. She hadn't slept. She hadn't even sat down. And when Colt returned from the creek with 2 full buckets, he didn't offer sympathy. Just set them down beside her and joined in. Neither spoke for a while. The quiet between them had changed. It was no longer the wary silence of strangers. It had become something taut, mutual, heavy with unspoken thought. By noon, the barn was reduced to blackened skeletons, the threat of further fire stamped out. Colt leaned against the fence, wiping sweat from his brow with a frayed bandana. Etta stood beside him, watching what was left of her livelihood smolder like a funeral pyre. "You still sure about this marriage?" she asked, voice low. Colt didn't look at her. "Are you?" "I'm not the one hiding from a man like Judd Carmichael." He exhaled slowly. "No, you're just staring him down." Etta turned toward him. "I'm not doing this to be noble. I'm doing it because I don't have a choice. I built that ranch with my father's hands. I'm not letting it go, not to a coward with money and a badge he bought." "You think marriage will stop him?" "It buys me time. Time to dig in. Fight back." Colt studied her for a long moment, the set of her shoulders, the fire in her gaze. There was no room in her for pity or romance. She was making a business decision just like him. "All right," he said. "Then let's get it done." The courthouse was 2 rooms and a sagging roof near the center of town. The clerk, an old man with a breath that reeked of tobacco and onion, looked at them with suspicion, then amusement, then boredom. "Witness," he grunted. The bartender, roped in from across the street, stood half asleep behind them, arms crossed. Colt and Etta stood side by side beneath a crooked painting of President Grant, the American flag behind them missing a star and a half its stitching. "No rings?" the clerk asked, already scribbling. "Don't need 'em," Etta replied. "Suit yourself." The vows were said with the stiffness of soldiers trading orders. Colt's voice was steady but distant. Etta's barely moved above a whisper. When the clerk declared them husband and wife, no one smiled. Back on the street, Etta looked at the paper in her hands. "So that's it. That's it." The silence that followed stretched longer than it should have. Colt shifted in his boots. "You want me to ride out?" "No," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I want you to come back to the ranch. Got work to do. Besides," she paused, expression unreadable, "we're married now. Might as well make it look like it." Colt nodded and mounted his horse. They returned to the ranch as man and wife in name only, but every step they took together added something heavier to the illusion, something neither could quite name. In the days that followed, Colt kept to the perimeter, patrolling fence lines and sharpening tools in the barn, what little was left of it. He kept a shotgun slung over his shoulder and a pistol on his hip. He never said where he was going or how long he'd be gone. Etta didn't ask. Inside, she managed what she could, feeding livestock, patching the kitchen roof, boiling coffee thicker than mud. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was sharp and dry. "You always as quiet?" she asked one evening, as they ate dinner at opposite ends of the long wooden table. "Only when I don't know what to say." "Try not saying the wrong thing." Colt chuckled softly. "You're good with a rifle and words. Rare combination. You'd be surprised." One night, Colt came home late, dust covering his coat, blood on his sleeve. Etta met him on the porch, lantern in hand, face pale. "What happened?" "Rattler got one of the steers. I put it down. Got bit myself." She didn't wait for permission. She dragged him inside, sat him down, and cleaned the wound with whiskey and rough cloth. He barely flinched. "You should have told me," she muttered, wrapping his arm. "I didn't want to worry you." She looked up, surprised. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Then, because if I get myself killed, this whole thing falls apart." Etta tied the bandage off a little tighter than necessary. "Next time, don't be noble. Just come back in one piece." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. A storm was coming. It arrived in the form of a note nailed to their front door. Colt found it at dawn, the nail buried deep in the wood, a single line written in uneven scrawl. "Leave by sundown, or burn with it." He brought it to Etta without a word. She read it once, then twice, face blank. "Well, they're getting bolder. This isn't some nameless thug," Colt said. "This is Judd style. Threat first. Fire next." "Then we don't wait," Etta said. "We act." He arched a brow. "How?" "By making it clear we're not afraid." Colt shook his head. "You put a show of strength out there, and they'll just double down. Then we make it more than a show." Etta left the porch, heading toward the shed where she kept her father's old rifles. Colt followed. "You ever use one of those before?" he asked. "I've used every gun on this property, including the one I keep under my pillow." Colt looked at her, equal parts admiration and concern. "You sure you're not the one running from something?" "I'm running toward something," she replied. "Justice. Vengeance. Take your pick." That night, Colt couldn't sleep. He walked the perimeter again, boots sinking slightly in the damp earth. The wind carried a strange stillness. No insects. No owls. Just the hush before something broke. He returned to the house around midnight to find Etta waiting by the hearth, rifle across her knees, eyes heavy but alert. "You trust me?" he asked. "No." He smiled. "Good. You shouldn't." She poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a chipped cup and handed it to him. They drank in silence, sitting close enough to feel each other's warmth, but not enough to touch. Colt cleared his throat. "You know, I lost someone. Wife and a daughter. 2 years ago." Etta didn't speak, but her eyes softened. "They died because I stayed too long in one town. Because I thought the past could be outrun." He looked down at his hands. "Since then, I've been riding with a grave in my chest." She set her cup down, fingers trembling slightly. "I lost my brother to Judd's gang. He was 17. They said it was a misunderstanding. Wrong place, wrong time. But you didn't believe it. No, she whispered. I believed it was a message. And I've been waiting for the day I could send one back. They didn't speak after that. The fire crackled. The storm passed outside, but inside the house, something else had taken root, raw and real. The next morning, Colt found an old map of the region tacked to the inside of the barn wall. He studied it, tracing trails, back roads, familiar paths that Judd might use. Etta appeared behind him, holding a fresh pot of coffee. You making a plan? She asked. Something like that. Well, make it count. Because I think Judd's already made his. Colt turned to her. How do you know? She opened her hand and showed him a bullet. Fresh. Polished. Left on the porch rail, right where her father used to sit. Colt stared at it. Then, at her. I think it's time you told me everything you know about Judd Carmichael, she said. His eyes darkened. Then you better sit down. The wind stirred again, this time with the promise of more than fire. This time it promised war. Dawn broke cold and windless. The sky had the hue of hammered steel, as if the world was holding its breath. Colt sat astride his horse on the edge of the canyon trail, staring down the path they'd chosen. One way in, narrow and steep, flanked by cliffs on either side. A perfect place for an ambush or to set one. Etta rode up beside him, her hat pulled low against the glare, rifle strapped tight to her saddle. Her face was unreadable, but her hands trembled slightly against the reins. Colt noticed, said nothing. They'll come this way? She asked. They always take the shortcut when they think no one's watching, he replied. Judd's men like to move fast and loud. He sends muscle, not minds. That work in our favor, only if we're faster and louder. They dismounted and moved quickly into position. Colt handed her a small pouch, gunpowder, nails, a twist of wire. She gave him a sharp look, but nodded, already understanding. He didn't need to explain the plan again. She'd memorized every step. In the quiet that followed, Colt crouched beside a boulder, watching the trail through a sliver of shadow. Etta took the high ground, belly to dirt, eyes narrowed through the rifle sight. Minutes passed. Then the sound came, first like thunder, then hooves, then voices. 4 riders, armed, laughing. Colt held his breath, waited. At the exact bend he'd predicted, the first rider crossed the wire. The charge exploded, a flash of dirt and noise and pain. 2 horses screamed. One man flew from a saddle, hit a rock hard, didn't move. The others scattered, trying to regroup. Etta fired once. Clean. The second rider dropped. The third wheeled toward her position. Colt emerged from behind the boulder, shotgun raised. 2 blasts, tight and fast. The man slumped, horse bolting riderless into the brush. Only one remained bigger than the rest, with a scar that split his cheek like a red river. He didn't run. He raised his rifle and fired, bullet grazing Colt's arm, spinning him sideways. Etta shouted his name and opened fire, but missed. The last rider turned and galloped off, disappearing into the ravine with a trail of blood behind him. Colt pressed a cloth to his arm, wincing. Are you hit bad? She called, sliding down the incline. Nothing fatal. She reached him, eyes flicking over the wound. Then, more urgently, he's going to tell Judd. Let him. Why? Colt stood, breath ragged. Because now Judd knows we're not running. They buried the dead quickly, marking the graves with stones and leaving no names. Etta didn't speak as they rode back to the ranch. She watched the sky the whole way, as if expecting the clouds to split open and reveal what came next. At the house, Colt cleaned his wound in silence while she paced. They'll come tonight, she muttered. Or tomorrow. But they'll come. He looked up. We'll be ready. She stopped, frustration flashing. You keep saying that. Like you've been ready your whole life. But you haven't told me what happened between you and Judd. Colt paused. Then he pulled a small, worn badge from his saddlebag, threw it on the table between them. I was law, he said. Back in Clearwater. Judd was just another name then. Robbery, extortion. Nothing special. But he had a charm, a way of getting folks to look the other way. You tried to stop him? I tried to expose him. Got close. Too close. My wife warned me, begged me to drop it. But I kept pushing. Then one night a fire. Like yours. But worse. Eda's face tightened. He made it look like an accident. But I know better. I buried my family in shallow earth and swore I'd never wear that badge again. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. So you ran. I survived. She set it down gently. And now I finish it. A knock came at the door. Colt's hand went to his holster, Eda behind him with her rifle already raised. But it wasn't Judd's men. It was a boy, 17 at most, dirty, gaunt, wearing boots too big for his feet. He looked at Colt like he'd seen a ghost. Name's Ellis, he said. Used to work for you, he added to Eda. Her brow furrowed. You left last spring. Got scared. Went east. But I heard what Judd's planning. He's got 20 men, all riding here by end of the week. Said he'll take the land with or without a signature. Colt stepped forward. Why warn us? Because he killed my cousin last month. Same way he killed your family. I want him gone. And I know where he keeps the deed. Colt exchanged a glance with Eda. What deed? Your father's land. Judd bribed the clerk. Forged a copy to make it look like the ranch passed him if you died. He was planning to burn you out and claim you vanished. But the real document's still in his office in town, safe behind a false wall. Eda folded her arms. How do I know you're not leading us into a trap? Ellis met her eyes. You don't. But you either gamble on me or wait for them to burn the rest of your land. The next morning, they rode for town. The three of them. No fanfare. No announcement. Colt dressed different this time. Not like a drifter. Like a man with a past. Badge polished. Coat clean. Eyes sharp. The townsfolk watched them ride in like ghosts walking under the midday sun. They tied the horses at the back of Judd's saloon, his self-proclaimed headquarters. Eda slipped through the rear, Ellis in tow. Colt walked straight through the front door. The piano stopped. Judd sat in his usual chair, legs wide, smile like a wolf. Time had thickened his face, darkened his eyes. But Colt would have recognized him anywhere. Well, I'll be, Judd said. Didn't think I'd see you again. Figured we had unfinished business, Colt replied. You alone. Does it matter? Judd stood. You've got nerve walking in here, wearing that badge again. I'm not here to talk. No, you're here to die. Behind them, a gun cocked. Eda stepped out from the back hallway. Rifle raised. Ellis followed, holding the real deed above his head. We've got it. The room exploded. Chairs overturned. Men reached for guns. Colt moved first, slamming the butt of his pistol into the nearest face, diving behind a table. Shots rang out, deafening in the tight space. Eda dropped one man with a clean shot to the chest. Colt took out another with a shot through the leg. Chaos. Smoke. Screaming. Judd fired blind, grazing Colt's shoulder. Colt lunged forward, tackled him to the ground. They wrestled, fists in fury. Judd was strong, but Colt had something deeper, resolve. He landed a punch hard enough to break bone. Judd slumped, wheezing. Should have killed me when you had the chance, Colt growled. Judd grinned through broken teeth. Still might. Colt cocked his pistol, aimed at Judd's temple. Eda stepped forward, hand on Colt's arm. No, she said. That's not justice. That's revenge. Colt stared at her, then slowly lowered the gun. They bound Judd, handed him to the sheriff, newly emboldened by the town's watchful eyes. The real deed was registered. The forgery burned. By dusk, they rode home bloodied, but alive. The sun dipped low, casting the ranch in gold. Eda leaned against the porch rail, eyes distant. You hesitated, she said. Colt nodded, for the first time in a long while. She smiled soft and sad. Means you're starting to feel again. He looked at her, eyes steady. Means I've got something to lose. She didn't answer. She just reached for his hand. And for the first time, he didn't pull away. Behind them, the wind shifted again. But this time, it carried no threat. Only the smell of smoke fading into the past. The wind howled across the valley like a thing alive, carrying dust and warnings with it. Eda stood on the porch of the ranch house, the barrel of her rifle resting against her hip, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sky had darkened with the threat of another storm, but it wasn't rain she was bracing for. It was men. Judd Carmichael's trial had been scheduled for next month, but his men hadn't waited. The remnants of his gang, loyal, feral, and cornered, had sworn vengeance. Ellis had overheard them while hiding out near the canyon pass, where they regrouped like wolves scenting blood. "They're coming," he had said that morning, pale and breathless. 10, maybe more. Tonight. Now, as dusk bled into night, the ranch waited. Silent. Ready. Colt adjusted the grip on his revolver as he stepped beside her. His coat was worn, the leather soft from age and use, but his stance was solid, rooted in something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Purpose. "They'll come fast," he said. "They always do," Etta replied. Their eyes met briefly. No fear. Only certainty. She stepped down from the porch while he took the north line of the property. They'd set traps, tripwire, oil-soaked torches, makeshift barricades. It wasn't a fortress, but it didn't need to be. It was a message. This land is not for taking. When the first gunshot cracked through the dark, it wasn't a surprise. Colt dropped into a crouch behind the fence, returning fire instantly. One of Judd's men screamed as he hit the dirt. The others spread out, flanking wide. Etta took her position in the loft of the stable, rifle trained on the trail. She exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and dropped another rider clean from his saddle. The sound of hoofbeats thundered through the field. Muzzle flashes lit the night like fireflies gone rabid. Ellis, hidden behind the well wall, threw a lantern into a trap pit, igniting the oil inside. Flames burst up in a hungry roar, blinding their attackers for a few precious seconds. Colt moved like a man who danced with death before and come away scarred but smarter. He shot, ducked, rolled, moved. Always forward. One of Judd's lieutenants lunged from the brush, blade raised, but Colt turned and fired point blank. No hesitation. Across the yard, Etta climbed down from the loft, out of bullets and patience. She drew her father's revolver from her coat, aiming low and fast. She moved with practiced grace, rage wrapped in silence. This was her home. This was her reckoning. The gang was thinning. 4 left. Then 3. Then came the one they hadn't counted on. Not a man. A boy. No more than 16, shaking with a sawed-off shotgun, standing between Ellis and Colt. "Don't move," the boy shouted, voice cracking. Gun shaking, so bad the barrel swayed like a reed in wind. Colt raised a hand slowly. "You don't want to do this." "You killed my brother," the boy spat. Ellis stepped forward. "I knew your brother. He beat a woman half to death for talking back. Don't make the same mistake." The boy's finger trembled on the trigger. Colt didn't flinch. "I don't shoot boys," he said. "But I won't let you shoot me either." For a moment, the only sound was the fire still burning in the trap pit, crackling like bones in a furnace. Then the boy dropped the gun and ran. Colt exhaled. 2 riders broke from the trees, trying to escape. Etta took one down. The other vanished into the night. Silence returned slowly, broken only by the ragged breath of survival. They waited, and when no more came, they lowered their weapons. Morning came sluggish and gray, casting long shadows over the wreckage. 3 bodies were buried by the fence line, unmarked and undeserved. Ellis sat on the porch steps, looking 100 years older, rubbing the bruises on his arms. Inside the house, Colt sat at the table, cradling a mug of coffee as if it were a relic. His knuckles were raw, shirt torn, but his eyes were calm. Etta walked in, rifle slung across her back, coat dusted with ash. "No more tracks," she said. "I think that was the last of them." He nodded. "You sure?" "No," she paused. "But I'm done living like I'm waiting." She sat across from him, meeting his eyes. The morning light painted her face in soft gold, made the bruises and soot seem somehow holy. "You're staying, aren't you?" she asked. He didn't answer at first, just looked around the kitchen. The cracked walls, the uneven floorboards, the window that creaked when the wind hit it just right. "I should," he said. "I want to." She reached for his hand. It was instinct now, no hesitation. The scars between them had begun to stitch together, not cleanly, but honestly. "I think we could make this real," she said. He looked down at their hands. Feels real already. Later, they stood at the edge of the field, watching the sun rise over what they defended. The ranch was battered, but it stood. Like them. I used to think I didn't have anything left to fight for, Colt said quietly. And now I know better. She rested her head against his shoulder, the wind picking up again, not with warning, but with promise. He turned to her, voice steady and low. You gave me something I thought I'd lost. Etta looked up, smiling. What? Hope. They stayed like that for a while, two souls forged in fire, stitched together not by romance, but by grit, trust, and survival. Behind them, Ellis hammered a new sign into the dirt near the road. Fresh wood. Fresh paint. Monroe McAllister Ranch. Home at last. And as the wind blew gently through the tall grass, Colt's voice echoed in his own mind, steady and strong. Turns out, love ain't found in grand gestures. It's in the quiet after the gunfire, the hands that don't let go, the voice that calls you back when the world says run. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. We've got more tales from the Wild West just waiting to be told.